RC closed species. Submit this version, please. I just added to it. Truthfully, I hate closed species. Not because they're just closed species. More along the lines they're uncreative.
Excuse me.
It's not that I don't feel some are cool or that others have awesome lore. It's more so because it's the same body types being tossed about, like, all over the place. Same traits and shapes. It's making them less unique.
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like, your opinion, man.
Now don't get me wrong, people can buy them or whatever the fuck ever, but people who are like, just because water dogs are unoriginal does not mean that Grim 2s or Jolly Raptors are. Yes, folks, even Grim 2s and Jolly Raptors are unoriginal. Why? Because a million of them are all over the damn place. It would be more original as a character, like only having one, not a million of them. Also, do not get me started on the community. It is nothing but drama too, and fans attack anyone who makes a character with similar traits. They make creativity limited and some fearful to just make whatever character they want, and that's why I hate them. Sorry, round heads aren't unique to Grim 2, and dogs with circle cheeks aren't unique to sushi dogs. Water dogs, well, aren't original. People can design their characters with similar traits, and people can make whatever character they want. Yes, even if they are similar to closed species. From a legal standpoint, it is 100% allowed. I don't understand why people make such a fuss over them. Personally, closed species to me is nothing but a brand name people keep buying because they are hard to obtain and it makes you look cool for hoarding them. It's Apple products all over again. Lol.
Alright, let me begin with what is perhaps a bit of a hot take in my community. I actually sort of adore closed species.
History's greatest monster!
Not the concept of them so much as the genre itself. And I know just using the word genre has felt like a punch in the gut to some of my fellow artists out there, but allow me to explain my bullshittery. A lot of closed species have, ironically enough, a lot of themes in common. A good chunk of them are either the cutest little monsters you ever did see, or beautiful humanoids, usually with wings for ears or some animal feature like a snake or shark tail. For a community notorious for being highly defensive and accusatory for anything even remotely related to their species, it's actually rather hilarious how similar a good handful of these species actually are. But with that said, I still like that, because personally I'm a big fan of those styles of character design. So if I ever want to see a cute, fluffy, chibi animal creature or a new type of fae-looking thing, I know I could just search up closed species on Deviant and be surrounded with all the fanciful creature designs that I could desire. That's why I tend to think of closed species as more of a genre rather than a category or anything else like that. Now, my gushing aside, let's actually talk about what closed species even are. The concept itself is rather self-evident, but I have to do my due diligence as a talky internet person and break it down for you. A closed species is a phenomenon. God, you have no idea how many times I've tried to say this fucking word. Okay, let's try this again. A closed species is a phenomenon that became popularized on Deviant, where all art trends are born and then rot in record time. They're part of a subgenre of the more popular and widespread adoptables market that still thrives on DeviantArt to this day. Whereas adoptables in general can be anything from a full character design to a set of clothing, an item, or just a furry, closed species are unique because they are, go figure, closed to the public. Although I'm sure many artists would still love fan art of their existing creatures, they typically just don't like people using the character concept for their own designs. In effect, this means you're not allowed to draw or create your own versions of these creatures, and the only way to attain one is through trading, raffles, or bidding wars. There are also MYO events standing for Make Your Own, which is the same as raffles and bidding wars and even trading at times, except instead of buying your own pre-designed closed species, you buy a slot which allows you the right to create your own. And if you're not an artist yourself, there are events like this where you can win your slot and then have the designer create one for you after the fact. Of course, all the while still keeping to the guidelines of this creature, and they're only considered official once being approved by the closed species owner or group. And even once you own your own special bab from a closed species, you can't actually do whatever you want with them. There's usually firm rules and regulations as to how the character can be customized, and sometimes you need more money or in-group activities to unlock extra features, rarities, or abilities for your little critter. And if you want to sell or trade them, then oh boy, be ready to follow even stricter regulations that place limitations on what designs can be sold or traded away even after someone successfully buys or wins one. Break any of these rules and you are at risk of being kicked from the group, having your bab deemed unofficial, or straight up having your ownership revoked. As many of you can probably guess, that last part is subject to much debate and drama. So, is your head spinning with just the basic rundown of the niche world of closed species?
Wow, my head's spinning!
Well, settle yourselves in, because we're not done yet.
God fucking damn it!
So, I have this little pet theory, and I just completely ripped off, Queen Curia with that line.
Who?
I believe there are 4 simple schools of thought in regards to closed species, and naturally I'll go over each for you and have a little chat about them. School 1. Closed species are stupid and toxic, fuck off. Alright, it's pretty straightforward. School 2. Closed species are actually valid and cool, fuck off. Also pretty straightforward. School 3. Closed species can be fine, but they can go too far with what they claim ownership of, and it breeds hostility towards other artists. Also, they are notoriously full of drama and extortionate prices. And School 4. Closed species as a concept is fine. People want to protect their intellectual property or keep specific creations within their own groups. Even if it's not the most original design, it's the lore, the collector nature, and community interaction that has the appeal more so than the design itself. As you can probably tell, the first 2 schools are a bit more black and white in nature, but that's because you'll normally find younger people in these groups, and nuance tends to come with age. Outsiders also tend to have less of a nuanced take on it because they don't know that much about it, and from the outside looking in, it can look pretty black and white. But, despite that, they are both still stances that people can hold nonetheless, so we're going to engage with them regardless. This is the stance you're probably most familiar with on YouTube and from older members of the art community. It's usually not presented as flatly as this, of course, but it's a sentiment behind a lot of the conversation. And honestly, I get it. I so get it. A big chunk of this comes from the perceived unoriginality of many closed species and the fierce protectiveness that can come hand in hand with that. Usually you'll see this referred to as just adding X, Y, or Z to an existing animal or human body and how that's hardly original, let alone something that you can claim. Which, you know, fair enough. There's also something to be said for the limitations that come attached with these closed species, and the continued protectiveness of the original creator in how they can be used even once sold. Sometimes this is due to the species belonging to a group that it was specifically designed for use within, which brings with it a long list of rules and regulations like any other DA group might. Understandably, there's some people that resent the rules and regulations that come attached to a creature that they have bought. However, to that I would say, just don't get that closed species then. I mean, I wouldn't choose to play a dwarf character if I wanted my character to be tall, thin, with fair features and an affinity for the bow, because at that point I'm describing an elf. You get my meaning? Another big point of contention is how much these artists charge for what critics perceive to be low-value closed species, and to that I can only say, well, the market decides? I'm sorry, you might find it outrageous and a bit r/delusional artist to ask $1,000 for a cat with a fanfare tail or a person with feather ears, but if someone is willing to pay the asked price, well, that's entirely up to them at the end of the day, and while we can all stare on in shock and confusion and make our little jabs, I certainly will. I don't think it's a sort of moral failing on the part of the closed species creator. Hell, if I could get $1,000 for selling a chibi, don't you think I would? I could use that cash to feed my Pokemon card addiction, that's all I'm saying.
Oh, yeah! Yeah!
And of course, there is another aspect to this price point. For very popular or well-known closed species, a huge part of the appeal is the exclusivity of them. Think what crypto bros are always harping on about, but it's not a Ponzi scheme dressed up as innovation. We'll come back to this concept a little bit later. In some cases, buyers are getting a closed species designed for them as well, and in that instance, they're not only paying for the closed nature of the species, but the design and time of the artist. So in that regard, I can understand some of these price points. Also, let's be real, most of us are artists to some degree or another. Are we really gonna harp on our fellow artists on their commission prices for asking what they feel their time and talent is valued at? You know, we have subreddits for this, but at the same time, I would be remiss not to make mention of perhaps the most dramatic and infamous sale of a closed species, coming in at a whopping $20,000. Oh my god. Never mind that the same buyer went on to spend a further $6,000 on other adoptables later in that week. Just holy shit. I won't be going into that drama in its entirety here, mostly because I want to keep this topic as a more general discussion of closed species rather than a deep dive on one situation. But don't worry, I won't leave you drama gremlins hanging either. For a more in-depth look at this drama, I recommend Izzy or Aziz's, I still don't know how to say your name, I'm so sorry, video covering the matter. However, I will note that while this particular situation devolves into a debate of ethics, responsibility, and mental health due to the purchaser's claim that it was a mania-fueled episode of reckless spending, which may well be true, I'd still like to put forward the point that it was a bidding war, which meant before the buyer in question spent that infamous $20,000, there were other people willing to match them up to that point. So there were multiple people willing to spend at least over 10k for these designs, and I doubt all of them were suffering a manic episode at the time. It's a little tidbit to keep in mind while listening to this story. Link for Izzy's video can be of course found in the description below. It is a wild ride, you will have fun, I assure you. Moving on, let's address the hard opposite opinion, that close species are perfectly valid and haters are just gonna hate. Much like our first hardline stance, this one has a lot of its own issues. It's a sort of blind acceptance you'll find in any hardline stance, often held by children or those actually creating and buying the closed species. And while I'm sure some of the people holding this stance genuinely mean well, they do fall foul by accidentally supporting unjust management of closed species too. Case in point, defending a closed species that are just things that already exist, or at least concepts that people can't really make claim to because they're so culturally widespread. Or they're just the simple merging of two things like a ghost dog, for example. Some of you know where I'm going with this. If I may briefly steal from a more wonderful YouTuber than myself, have this funny example.
They even tried to claim copyright over the species, and species is in the biggest of quotation marks here, you'll see why, ghost doggos.
Just to inform you, but ghost doggos are a closed species, meaning you can't just make one. You need to ask and or buy one. They also belong to me. So you should have credited me as well, but you never asked to make one either. So please remove this, thank you.
No, he isn't a closed species. I just made him.
UHH still resembles and has the same name as my species called Ghost Doggos. Link, please remove this. Thank you.
No, I won't be removing this. First off, resemblance is not enough reason for me to no longer draw my character. Second, you can't ban people from the words ghost doggo. Doggo is a common cutesy name for a doggo, and a ghost is a widely used noun. So putting the two together does not result in a name only one person can use. Thirdly, the idea of a canine with a skull/mask is not a new idea, nor is it specific to you. Neither is the idea of a dog as a ghost. There have been people before you with the concept, and there will be people after. Fourth, as a close species maker, you should always be prepared to find something similar. There are no original ideas, and with as many artists and creators out there will always be something similar. You cannot have everyone take down everything that resembles your stuff. Fifth, ghost dogs are not a solid closed species concept. It is a dog as a ghost. Again, you are not the first to come up with this concept. And it is wildly unreasonable to say that anyone who has something such as a ghost dog as a character is copying you or using the idea without your permission. I would suggest taking a look at your species and implementing aspects to make them stand out as your own, because dogs who are ghosts is not a firm idea for a closed species at all. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. My deviation will stay up.
I tried to reason with you, but you are listening. I'm still probably going to reporting ya for taking and naming it after my closed species. Sorry, but this bothers me extremely bad.
Oh my god, what even is this? That salt shaker? Mine. Make it teal and put pepper in it, now it's original. You have a teal pepper shaker in your comic? Illegal. Not allowed. I'm calling the police. The fact that they admit that this isn't even a species and they're basically just saying that dogs who have died and become a ghost as a concept is something they own, that's dumb. It's so tasty.
Thank you for carrying my dumbass with your own content, Ponder. I'd say go sub to her, but let's be real, if you're here, you already are. Still, link below. In short, you can't own simple concept like a fucking ghost dog, like, what? A lot of species have this pitfall of having overly simple designs or visual traits that are too universal to ever truly be claimed by one person. And to prove my point, I am about to bombard you with examples. That's a satyr or a fawn. That's a bunny. That's a fox. That's a dog. That's a fairy. Those are angels. These ones are just cute manta rays. A Nico with a lace kink. An assortment of jello and liquid inside species. These are all dragons or dinosaurs, and every picture here is from a different closed species. And all of these are straight furries. And wait, is that a Mimikyu? So on and so forth. With that said, I still like every single one of the closed species that I just showed you. Contrary to popular belief, I don't even mind that some of them are just things that already exist with a few tweaks. If I may backtrack just a little bit, a lot of these criticisms come from a purely visual standpoint. You can glance at some of these creatures and think to yourself, oh, that's just a satyr, why would I need permission to make one of those? And you would be correct. However, a good many of them don't put their originality in the visual design, which a good chunk of these arguments pivot around, and instead put that value into the lore or the club that they are a part of. If you're looking for examples of theft, you have to consider the context of the creature, its lore, its attributes, as well as its visuals. And then you need to consider the cultural influences surrounding that creature. In that sense, they're just as valid as any monster from any specific fantasy work. Take the creatures from something in Narnia or the Spiderwick Chronicles, for example. These have inspirations taken directly from pre-existing mythical creatures, but within their own worlds, they have their unique histories and attributes that make them recognizable in that context. However, by that same virtue, it means they cannot close the species to other creators. These are things built from similar foundations, but both is unique to their particular world. Or if we want to pick something a little more mainstream at the moment, Harry Potter has Dementors. We all know them, they feed on fear and trauma, and they're black close ghost bastards. And if you went purely off the visuals, as a lot of these arguments tend to stem from, you could say they were a ripoff of closed species Grim Reapers. My point is that the world is filled with similar inspirations and people will have overlapping ideas all the time. Who is to say that two people could not individually come up with the same simple idea of a dog that is made of slime, or has liquid insides, or is of the sea? Let me put this more bluntly. Everyone knows what a dog is. Everyone knows what death is. Most cultures have a concept of ghosts or the afterlife. Ergo, it's completely normal for people to come up with ghost dogs. In short, the devil is in the details. Now for the final two schools of thought, you probably already landed one of these yourselves, given that they actually have some nuance to them. I'm not going to go over the bleedingly obvious again. Instead, I'm going to use each of these as a chance to talk about the perhaps less obvious side of closed species discourse. As I mentioned previously, some of the value of having your own little closed species creature is the admission to the club that it's attached to. For closed species, the club is usually a group on DA or an outside website built by the species designers. As someone that spent a fair share of their high school experience bouncing between DeviantArt groups and getting excited to submit an OC and then just never doing anything with it, I can understand the appeal of these closed species groups on that level. There's undeniably a lot of positives that come with entry to a community, and the closed species communities have the allure of being exclusive. I'll talk a bit more about that side of things in the final school of thought, but for this one we're going to discuss how that can become its own boiling pot of drama. Because of course it's dramatic as hell. As with anything online, even more so when artists are involved, where there is life, there is strife. Aside from the more obviously outlandish cases of drama that people might think of, ergo the you can't draw ghost dogs, they're mine, there is a lot of contention surrounding the infighting and the sort of undercurrent of corruption that can occur in ththese groups. I know we're talking about cute furries and the like as though there's some sort of black market rival gang warfare going on, but honestly, yeah, it sort of gets that way sometimes.
Rattle 'em, boys!
Amongst the sea of petty drama and complaints about the price point of adoptables, if you wade out into the world of closed species criticism and drama blogs, you'll find sordid tales of bully mods, rival groups ripping off other species, off-brands, and unlawful sales of cute babies. There's countless tales of moderators and owners of closed species misusing their power, playing favorites, only giving out rare or valuable slots to their friends, only to then revoke designs bought or won over any perceived slight or deviation from the group's standards, sometimes fairly within their stated rules, sometimes as a matter of petty friend arguments. Accusations of group-on-group creative theft and war over who has the right to be drawing dogs of the sea or bunnies that emerge with food continents. Then sending out their hordes of white knights and sunken cost fallacy brethren to defend their particular cute creature cult. As you can imagine, it's a bit of a war zone. Personally, I was under the impression that things had calmed down over the years, but a cursory glance back at the drama blogs keeping track of closed species shenanigans shows it's alive and well. I'd simply become blind to it in my old age as my interests drifted to other platforms. Not that YouTube is particularly drama-free, even when compared to DeviantArt squabbles. Now, as you may have noticed throughout this video, I have alluded to particular closed species themes and types here and there, but I haven't named any specific dramas or group. I've done this because these sort of squabbles pop up everywhere, and it's not actually fair to nail down any group or species for it without getting into the nitty-gritty details of each, which is not really what we're here for today. Basically, what I'm saying is that while I reference sea dogs or jello animals, I'm not actually shaming water dogs or pachypillas, for example. They're just recognized closed species tropes that I'm using as a reference point for people. And anyway, it's not as though there isn't drama in every community, and it would be pretty unfair to paint everyone with an interest in closed species or adoptables in this light. So just keep that in mind while we go forward. With that rather nightmarish depiction of DeviantArt and closed species covered, let's bring it back to the other side of the coin. After all, the people behind these creations, by and large, start young and passionate. They're not big companies, and theft is rampant online, so you may want to try and share your creations while still holding some level of creative control and credit. Sometimes this goes too far, as we previously discussed, but I can't really fault them for being paranoid to a certain extent. Speaking from a personal experience that I'm sure many artists can relate to, there's a particular sting an insult to having your art copied, stolen, or just plain ripped off, especially when you don't have the following or any real ability to have retribution for that theft. So in that sense, I wholeheartedly empathize with the paranoia a closed species creator might feel in that environment. It's just that there are unfortunately cases where that paranoia can get the best of people, and even more unfortunate bystanders just get caught up in the crossfire. So my advice to closed species would-be creators is to not look for enemies around every corner, and be charitable when you think there might be a case of theft. Things can usually be talked out if everyone's acting in good faith, and you never want to be seen as the aggressor in situations of this nature. It can break apart whatever community you've been trying to foster. And that, my friends, is what we call a segue. It's not a good one, but it's the best she has. Let's talk about the community appeal. Because as I said before, community and exclusivity is a big part of these designs, just as much as it can be corrupted and twisted in petty drama. For many of these species, buying one is like buying admission to a new club. A place to hang out with like-minded people, create stories, and have your character join in events with the group that you've earned. It's not all that different to how people congregate around OC and RP DeviantArt groups, albeit with perhaps a higher price point of entry and a bit more structure. But the appeal is still the same. It's just a club that you can become a part of, and above that, it's an exclusive club sometimes. Which brings us to the toy collector side of things, because when I mentioned NFTs before, I wasn't fucking kidding. There's a market for these guys, and where there's a market, there are speculators and collectors, which has its obvious ups and downs. From speculators that buy up designs purely to sit on them and hope they become more expensive for resale, to hoarders that cause their own controversies in the community. But is it really so different to collecting Beanie Babies or Pokemon cards? I myself am a proud, but secretly very ashamed Pokemon card addict. But here's the thing, when I collect Pokemon cards, I do it because it brings me joy, because I like shiny, pretty things and pocket monsters. I've even come into possession of 1 or 2 cards that I know I could sell for pretty big bucks, but I never will because they're mine and I love them. The same cannot be said for all collectors, however. While looking through some of the drama tumblers focused on closed species, I occasionally came across sentiments of anxiety. The idea that the market would crash and buyers would be stuck with expensive but now useless adoptables. To that, I can only say, try not to get into this with a business mindset. That's a surefire way to buy things for all the wrong reasons, and the odds of you losing out are pretty high. I would hardly think of the closed species DeviantArt community as a stable market. But hey, if you just really desperately want your own wicked cat monster design or cute squishy slug and you have the means to pay up, then go for it. Otherwise, maybe you look into different financial ventures.
You know the rules, and so do I.
Right, so we've covered an awful lot of ground today. I began this video by telling you that I adore closed species, and when I first wrote those words, I hadn't seen nearly as much about them as I have now. It was more a distant childhood memory of the DeviantArt back in my day. So with that in mind, with the toxic cultures, the weird trading practices, price points that would send me onto the street, and an abundance of unoriginality and design theft, do I retract that sentiment now? Fuck you, no. Closed species are still a genre to me, and they're one I will gush over till I'm blue in the face. Cute is cute! Look at this thing. Doesn't it just turn your insides to gooey mush? Or what about these? Let's not even ignore how banger the cats are. Like, oh my god. Look, just hold on. Okay. I'm gonna take a moment to just show you some of my absolute favorite closed species examples, and I want you to just experience this with me. So I'll level with you. Everything on DeviantArt or related to the internet or artists in any capacity is gonna be messy. It's gonna be a bit catty and dramatic. It's just the way we artists tend to get sometimes. Especially when we're online or still pretty young ourselves. But don't let any of that poison you to these little guys. Would I recommend that anyone becomes a collector? No, not really. Not unless they really fill you with joy and passion. And if they do, then Godspeed, I wish I had your bank account. But now, at the end of this video, I have one last little smack in the face for you all. I am both terribly excited and equally ashamed to present to you my own species. That's right, fuckers, I'm selling out. Closed species own my fucking soul now, and we're all just gonna have to deal with that. So, first and foremost, these 3 ought to be familiar to you. My most darling Babadoodles, Vix and Trix are old favourites, and now I've made the assets you'd need to be able to create your own Babadoodles. Then over here, we have another familiar face, albeit with a bit of a glow up, meet Shao. And yes, that is just Shark and Owl mashed together, and no, I will not reconsider. And lastly, well, this one might be a tad cheeky of me, but I do tend to get a bit spicy at times, Voidlings. I know my Discord is screaming at me in the distance. I've promised lore and rules about creating voidlings for a while now, and I might be a bit mean to tease this, but rest assured, it'll be out eventually. Quay and I are actually going to work on some video content for y'all about the lore and creation, so just hold on to your butts. In the meantime, just know that they're coming. So that's these three all wrapped up, and yes, just like it says on the tin, these are open species. Now, we discussed a lot about closed species throughout all of this, so let me very briefly explain open species to you. Generally speaking, open species are just bases for people. There are occasions where a closed species might be considered semi-open, which means anyone can make their own so long as they follow particular rules. Usually these rules being don't sell them for your own profit, always credit back to the artist, or follow the rules that the creature is created under. It varies from open species to open species, but generally you can consider them an entry-level, friendly species that you can work with before having to spend any money. So here are my open species, along with the 3 golden rules that you'll follow before you can go forth and claim your own baby. First, always remember to credit back, kids. Hell, you can just link this video if you like, but any social media will do. Secondly, don't forget to show me what you make. That's sort of the whole joy of open species, you know? And third, perhaps most important of all, no one is to sell these species. You can commission, of course, but I don't want these babies to be sold for a profit. They're open for a reason. Now go forth and multiply. Oh, that's right, this last one. Alright, I'll level with you. This one is a little bit different. These here are going to be a closed species, but don't worry, I'm not going to bleed anyone's wallets. Let me introduce them first and then I'll explain. Meet Darlinkis! I know, the name's a bit odd, but I'm kind of sold to it now. Darlinkis are soul parasites, although if you want to get cute, you could call them soul pet. The story goes that once Darlinkis were free spirits that slowly died out due to the trauma inflicted upon the earth. In a moment of great sadness and desperation, the last Darlinki was saved by a man that opted up his life in turn for its, to try and save at least some part of the species. What happened instead was a merging of lives. The Darlinki borrowed the man's soul as it was open to its presence, and from there, Darlinki eggs were passed down through that man's bloodline, each of its children and their children's children, and so on and so forth. Today, a good chunk of the population can be born with a Darlinki egg nestled inside their heart, and should the egg hatch, well, that's your own little soul parasite. Be careful if you do have one of your own one day. They tend to wither and die if the soul they're bonded to takes too much damage. In short, take care of yourselves to take care of them. That's obviously a very simple summary, and there's more details and things to be ironed out, but that's the gist of these little fellas. Now, how does one buy a Darlinki of their own? Easy, you don't. There's to be no money exchanged for these, they are won and gifted. In simple terms, the only way to get our Darlinki is to win one in a raffle, or be present on a design stream at the time and request one, or win guessing egg games. So no, Darlinkis are not to be sold for financial gain. They can be gifted or traded, but never sold. In short, these little guys shouldn't come at a cost to your wallet. And by that same token, no Darlinki should ever be sold on. They can be gifted, of course, but money might as well be poison to them as far as I'm concerned. The only exception to this rule might be if they were putting money towards a charity event, but other than that, it's cashless. Now, I do understand I'm being quite conceited with all of this. There's probably only 10 of you still watching, and I do thank you for your pity watch, but I figure if I'm gonna commit to an idea, I might as well really commit to it. And hey, if the only Darlinki to ever be designed for someone is my little darling here, well, I think he's cute as a button, and he'll fit right in with the rest of this mess of a channel. Thank you everyone for joining me on that little journey. I was not expecting to get as into closed species as I did by the end there. They're very interesting, and I do understand why some people are turned off because of the, you can't draw that, that's a ripoff of my species, and then you turn around and it's like, bro, that's a dog. I do fully understand that, but there's more to it than just that, and you know, bad actors is gonna be everywhere. So yeah, I hope some of you do end up wanting a Darlinki, because I do enough free art streams anyway, so I figure why not have design streams for Darlinkis and people can have them, and I just think it's a cute idea, I don't know. And okay, what social am I gonna plug today? Watch my Twitch. Watch my Twitch or my streaming YouTube channel. That is where the free art streams and the Darlinki streams and all that, that's where all of that goes. I'm actually a lot more active on streams, just because obviously I can do them a lot more often than I can full videos. So yeah, links below, obviously. I hope I will see you there. Alright, I've wasted your time long enough, I'll leave you. With that, I'm out. Take care of yourselves, my guys.